Stop wasting my money! The words echo across the crowded emergency room at Cleveland Clinic, and every pair of eyes turns toward us. My son Kevin just yanked my insurance card from my shaking hands while I sit here struggling to breathe from a severe allergic reaction. The doctor wants to run comprehensive tests to figure out what nearly killed me, but Kevin sees dollar signs instead of his dying father. I'd raised this man, worked 43 years as an engineer to provide for his family, and this is how he treats me in my most vulnerable moment. The elderly woman next to me whispers to her daughter, "How awful," and I want to disappear into the hospital floor. But I don't say a word. I just sit there in silence, my mind working, planning. 3 days later, Kevin would discover the real meaning behind those 4 words. But before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments. Have you ever had a family member treat you like a burden? And don't forget to subscribe for more real family drama stories like this one. My name is Tom Patterson. I'm 71 years old, and I need to start at the beginning so you understand how I got here. For 45 years, I was married to the love of my life, Margaret. We built something beautiful together, a solid marriage, a comfortable home in Lakewood, Ohio, and enough savings to enjoy our golden years. I worked as a mechanical engineer at General Electric for 43 years. Every morning at 6 sharp, I'd kiss Margaret goodbye and drive to the plant. Every evening, I'd come home to her smile and the smell of dinner cooking. We lived simply, saved carefully, and by the time I retired at 65, we had accumulated $186,000 in savings, plus a paid-off house worth about $315,000. Not rich, but comfortable, secure. Our son Kevin seemed to inherit my work ethic, at least in the beginning. He got his business degree, landed a job as an account manager at a local insurance company, married a nice nurse named Wendy, and gave us 2 beautiful grandchildren, Emma and Jake. We thought we'd done everything right as parents. I had trusted Kevin completely. Looking back now, I realized that trust was the first mistake in a long chain of mistakes that nearly cost me everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 2 years ago, our perfect world crumbled when Margaret found a lump during her morning shower. Breast cancer, stage 2. The doctors caught it early, they said, but the treatment would be aggressive. Chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, the full arsenal of weapons against an invisible enemy trying to steal my wife away. I never left her side during those 2 long years. Through every doctor's appointment, every chemo session that left her pale and retching, every sleepless night when the pain medication couldn't touch what was eating her alive from the inside, I held her hand through it all, watching the woman I'd loved for 45 years fight for every breath. The medical bills were staggering, even with Medicare and supplemental insurance. Co-pays, deductibles, experimental treatments not covered by insurance, it all added up. I didn't care about the money. I would have spent every penny we'd saved to keep Margaret with me one more day. And I did spend it. Nearly $45,000 over those 2 years, depleting our savings account month by month. Margaret died on a Tuesday morning in March. She slipped away while I was holding her hand, just like she'd lived, quietly, gracefully, without making a fuss. And suddenly, I was alone. That's when Kevin stepped in to help. I don't know if you've ever lost someone you've shared your entire adult life with, but grief does strange things to your mind. The simplest tasks become overwhelming. Paying bills, managing insurance claims, dealing with Medicare paperwork. It all felt impossible without Margaret there to help me think clearly. Kevin noticed me struggling. He'd stop by the house and find me staring at piles of medical bills and insurance forms, too paralyzed by sadness to make sense of any of it. "Dad," he said one evening about 3 weeks after the funeral, "let me help you with this financial stuff. You shouldn't have to worry about it right now." It seemed like such a blessing. Kevin worked in insurance, understood the terminology, knew how to deal with companies that tried to deny claims. Wendy supported the idea too. "Kevin's really good with money, Dad. Let him take some of this burden off your shoulders." So I signed the papers. Power of attorney for financial decisions. Added Kevin's name to my checking account as an authorized user. Gave him access to my safe deposit box. In my grief-clouded state, it felt like the responsible thing to do. I thought I was getting help managing my finances. I didn't know I was handing over control of my entire life to someone who would eventually see me as nothing more than an obstacle to his inheritance. For the first 3 months, Kevin was everything a grieving father could hope for in a son. He organized my bills by due date, set up automatic payments for utilities and insurance, and handled all the Medicare paperwork from Margaret's final hospital stay. He'd come over twice a week, usually with Wendy and the kids, and we'd review my finances together at the kitchen table. "Dad, you're in good shape," he'd say, pointing to bank statements. "Even after Mom's medical expenses, you've got solid savings and no debt. The house is paid off. You can live comfortably for years." I felt such relief having someone competent handling the details. Kevin would explain each decision, show me what he was doing, ask for my approval before making any changes. He helped me understand Medicare supplement policies, and even found me a better deal on car insurance. The grandchildren visited more often, too. Emma, 8 years old with Margaret's gentle smile, would curl up next to me on the couch while I read her stories. 5-year-old Jake would bring his toy trucks and build elaborate construction sites on my living room carpet, explaining his engineering plans with the same enthusiasm I'd once brought to my job. For those first few months, I felt supported, loved, like family was supposed to work. It started so innocently, but I began noticing small changes. Kevin would study my bank statements longer than necessary, making notes on a yellow legal pad. He'd ask questions about my spending habits, my long-term plans, my health status. By the 4th month, Kevin's helpful suggestions started feeling less like suggestions and more like gentle commands. "Dad, do you really need those expensive vitamins? The generic ones at Walmart have the same ingredients for a third of the price." I was spending $89 a month on supplements my doctor had recommended, but Kevin made it sound wasteful. "Dad, you're paying $180 a month for premium cable when you only watch 3 channels. Let me call and downgrade your service." "Dad, that lawn service is charging you $60 a week. I can find neighborhood kids to mow for $20. Each suggestion made financial sense, so I went along with it. Kevin was trying to help me save money, I told myself. But something about his tone had changed. Less asking, more telling. He'd already called the cable company before mentioning it to me, already found the cheaper lawn service and scheduled them to start. I started feeling like a guest in my own life. The language shifted too, subtle at first. Kevin began saying "we" when talking about my money. "We can afford to help Emma with dance lessons." "We should think about updating your will." "We need to be more careful about unnecessary expenses." "We?" When I questioned it gently. "Kevin, it's my money, not ours." He'd get that hurt look. "Dad, I'm just trying to help. After everything you and Mom went through, I want to make sure you're protected." Wendy would nod supportively. "Tom, Kevin spends hours managing your accounts. He just wants what's best for you." One sleepless night, about 6 months after giving Kevin financial control, I found myself in my home office at 2 a.m, reading through the papers I'd signed in my grief-clouded state. I needed to understand exactly what authority I'd given him. The power of attorney was limited to financial decisions while I was mentally competent, which I certainly was. Kevin could pay bills, manage investments, and handle banking on my behalf, but the accounts remained in my name. I was still the primary owner of everything. The bank account paperwork showed Kevin as an authorized user, not a joint owner. He could access the money and make transactions, but ultimately, the account belonged to me. I could revoke his access at any time with proper notification. Reading those documents by lamplight, I felt the first flutter of relief I'd experienced in months. Kevin had significant access to my financial life, but I hadn't signed away ownership of anything. The house deed still bore only my name. The investment accounts listed me as the sole owner. Why was I looking this up at 2 a.m? Because Kevin had started talking about estate planning and protecting family assets. Wendy kept asking questions about my will, my beneficiaries, my long-term care plans, questions that felt more like inventory than concern. Still, I told myself I was being paranoid. These were my son and daughter-in-law, not strangers trying to defraud me. But the next morning, Kevin did something that made my blood run cold. He started talking about our money. "Dad, we've been thinking," Kevin said over Sunday dinner at my house. "Emma wants to take dance classes at the studio downtown, but they're pretty expensive. $200 a month. I was cutting into the pot roast I'd cooked for their weekly visit, the same recipe Margaret had used for 30 years. That sounds wonderful. Emma would love dance classes. The thing is," Kevin continued, passing the mashed potatoes to Wendy, "we can afford it now that we're managing our family money more efficiently." Those savings from switching your cable and lawn service add up. Our family money. I set down my fork and looked at Kevin carefully. What do you mean, our money? Kevin exchanged a quick glance with Wendy before smiling. Dad, you know what I mean. You know what The family finances. Now that I'm helping you manage everything, we can make better decisions as a unit, pool our resources, plan for everyone's future. Kevin, I said slowly, it's my money, not ours. I earned it over 43 years of work. Wendy leaned forward. Tom, of course it's your money legally. But Kevin spends so much time managing your accounts, organizing your finances, making sure you're getting the best deals. We just think of it as family resources now. Shared responsibility. Emma looked up from her plate. Grandpa, can I really take dance classes? I smiled at my granddaughter. But inside, something cold was spreading through my chest. Kevin wasn't managing my money anymore. In his mind, he was managing his inheritance. The red flags I ignored. The first real confrontation happened 2 months later over my routine cardiology appointment. I'd been seeing Dr. Harrison for 5 years, ever since a mild heart episode during Margaret's cancer treatment. Nothing serious, just monitoring, annual EKGs, blood work to check my cholesterol and blood pressure. Dad, Kevin said when I mentioned my upcoming appointment, didn't you just see Dr. Harrison last year? It's an annual appointment, Kevin, routine monitoring. But do you really need it? I mean, you feel fine, right? Wendy's a nurse. She can check your blood pressure at home. Why spend money on unnecessary doctor visits? Wendy nodded from the kitchen where she was loading my dishwasher. Tom, at 71, these routine visits often don't change anything. Your heart is stable. Your medications are working. Unless you're having symptoms, annual cardiology visits are really just revenue generators for doctors. The casual confidence in her voice chilled me. Wendy saw elderly patients every day at the hospital. She knew exactly how to make medical advice sound authoritative and caring while being completely wrong. My insurance covers it, I said. Insurance covers it, but there's still the copay, the time off work for me to drive you, the stress of unnecessary medical procedures, Kevin replied. We're trying to be smarter about healthcare spending. We, again. I canceled the appointment to avoid further argument. It seemed easier than fighting about it. But lying in bed that night, I realized what was happening. Kevin wasn't just managing my money anymore. He was managing my health care, my independence, my life. That's when I started paying closer attention. The prescription incident happened at Kroger Pharmacy on a busy Tuesday afternoon. I'd gone to refill my blood pressure medication, the same prescription I'd been taking for 3 years without problems. The pharmacist, a young woman with kind eyes, processed my insurance and handed me the bottle. That'll be $43, Mr. Patterson. I reached for my wallet, but Kevin appeared beside me. I hadn't even seen him come into the store. Excuse me, Kevin said to the pharmacist. Can you check if there's a generic version of this medication? The brand name is unnecessarily expensive. The pharmacist looked confused. Sir, this is already the generic. The brand name would be about $90. But surely there's a cheaper alternative, something with the same active ingredient? Kevin, I said quietly, it's $43. I can afford it. But Kevin was already pulling out his phone, Googling cheaper pharmacies, asking the pharmacist about discount programs for seniors, making suggestions about pill splitting to make the prescription last longer. Other customers in line were starting to stare. The pharmacist kept glancing between Kevin and me, clearly uncertain who was in charge of my medical decisions. Never mind, I told her, handing over my credit card. I'll take it as prescribed. Kevin didn't speak to me during the drive home, but I could feel his disapproval radiating from the passenger seat. That night, I called Dr. Harrison's office and rescheduled my cardiology appointment. Enough was enough. Kevin might control my bank account, but he didn't control my health. Not yet. Emma's 8th birthday party should have been a celebration. Instead, it became the day I realized how deep Kevin's control had spread into every corner of my relationship with my grandchildren. The party was at Kevin and Wendy's house, a modest colonial in Westlake with a mortgage that stretched their budget thin. I arrived with a card containing a crisp $100 bill, the same amount I'd given Emma for her last 2 birthdays. Margaret and I had always been generous with the grandchildren, and I saw no reason to change that tradition. Emma tore open my envelope and gasped, $100! Thank you, Grandpa. But before she could hug me, Kevin smoothly took the card from her hands. Emma, that's way too much. Grandpa made a mistake. My stomach dropped. Kevin, it's not a mistake. It's her birthday gift. Dad, $100 is excessive for an 8-year-old. We're trying to teach her the value of money, not spoil her. Kevin folded the bill and handed it back to me. $25 is plenty for a child her age. Emma's face fell. Wendy appeared at Kevin's shoulder, nodding in agreement. Tom, we really appreciate your generosity, but we want the children to have realistic expectations about money. I looked around the room, at Emma's disappointed face, at 5-year-old Jake watching the adults argue over his sister's birthday money, at the other parents pretending not to notice the family drama unfolding at the gift table. Of course, I said, taking the 100 back and pulling out a 20 and a 5 instead. You're absolutely right. But I wasn't right. They were stealing more than money. They were stealing my relationship with my grandchildren. The breaking point came over hearing aids. After Margaret died, my hearing had gotten noticeably worse, probably from years of machinery noise at the plant, probably accelerated by stress and age. I'd been asking people to repeat themselves, turning the TV volume up loud enough to annoy myself, missing parts of phone conversations. Dr. Weber, my family doctor, referred me to an audiologist who confirmed moderate hearing loss and recommended digital hearing aids. Good ones, the kind that would actually help, cost $2,800 for the pair. I mentioned this to Kevin during one of his twice-weekly financial review sessions at my kitchen table. $2,800? For hearing aids? Kevin's voice rose sharply. Dad, you can get hearing amplifiers at CVS for $50. The audiologist says those aren't the same thing. These are custom-fitted, digitally programmed. You're 71 years old? How many more years do you realistically need premium hearing aids? Kevin slammed his hand on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. You're wasting my inheritance on overpriced medical gadgets. The words hung in the air like poison gas. My inheritance, not the family money or our resources. My inheritance. As if I were already dead, as if my money already belonged to him, as if my comfort and quality of life were obstacles to his financial planning. Kevin's face went white as he realized what he'd said. Dad, I didn't mean— Yes, you did. I stood up from my own kitchen table and walked to the window looking out at the garden Margaret had planted 3 years ago. Get out of my house, Kevin. But that wasn't the worst thing Kevin would say to me, not even close. 2 weeks after the hearing aid explosion, Kevin came back to apologize. He brought flowers, a card from the grandchildren, and Wendy's professional medical opinion to back up his position. Dad, I was wrong to lose my temper, but I want you to understand where we're coming from. Kevin sat across from me in Margaret's chair, the one I couldn't bear to move even though seeing him in it made my chest tight. Wendy deals with elderly patients every day. She sees families bankrupted by unnecessary medical procedures, people talked into expensive treatments that don't improve their quality of life. We just don't want you to be taken advantage of. Wendy nodded earnestly from the sofa. Tom, I've worked in geriatrics for 15 years. Hearing aid companies prey on seniors with aggressive sales tactics. The truth is, at your age, expensive hearing aids often don't provide significant improvement over basic amplifiers. Your brain has adapted to gradual hearing loss. Sudden artificial enhancement can actually be disorienting and uncomfortable. She sounded so confident, so professional. This was Wendy the registered nurse speaking, not Wendy the daughter-in-law who wanted to preserve her husband's inheritance. I see patients every week who spent thousands on hearing aids that end up in drawers because they can't tolerate them, she continued. The audiology industry has quotas to meet, commissions to earn. They're not necessarily recommending what's best for you. I wanted to believe my son was protecting me, not controlling me. I wanted to believe my daughter-in-law was offering medical expertise, not financial manipulation. So I canceled the hearing aid appointment. That decision would come back to haunt me in the worst possible way. First, let me ask you something. If your own child humiliated you like this in public, what would you do? Comment below and let me know, because what I did next might surprise you. The evening it all fell apart started like any other Tuesday. I'd made myself a simple dinner. Baked chicken breast, steamed broccoli, and wild rice. Nothing fancy, nothing I hadn't eaten hundreds of times before. I was sitting in my recliner afterward, watching the news, when my throat started feeling scratchy. At first I thought I was getting a cold. Then my lips began tingling. Within 10 minutes, my face was swelling and I was having trouble swallowing. I looked in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. My eyes were puffy slits, my lips grotesquely enlarged. I couldn't breathe properly. Panic shot through me as I fumbled for my phone and called Kevin. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Something's wrong," I wheezed. "Can't breathe. Face is swelling." "Are you sure it's not just heartburn? Sometimes that can feel like breathing trouble." "Kevin, I need to go to the hospital." A long pause. "Dad, emergency rooms are really expensive. Maybe try some Benadryl first? Wendy says most allergic reactions aren't as serious as they seem." My vision was starting to blur. "I'm calling 911. "Don't call 911. The ambulance bill alone is $800. I'll be right there." 35 minutes later. 35 minutes of struggling to breathe while my throat continued closing. Kevin finally arrived with Wendy and a bottle of generic Benadryl from their medicine cabinet. One look at me, and even Wendy's medical training couldn't deny the obvious. "We need to get him to Cleveland Clinic right now," she said. But Kevin was still arguing about the cost of emergency treatment as I sat there fighting for air. That should have told me everything I needed to know about what was coming next. Saturday night at Cleveland Clinic's emergency room is controlled chaos on a good day. Tonight was not a good day. The waiting area buzzed with the usual mix of genuine emergencies and people who probably should have gone to urgent care. A teenager with a skateboarding injury sat next to an elderly man clutching his chest. A mother held a feverish toddler while trying to fill out insurance paperwork. I could barely speak by the time we reached the registration desk. My airway was closing, and every breath felt like sucking air through a coffee stirrer. The triage nurse took one look at me and moved me to the front of the line. "Severe allergic reaction," she called to someone behind the desk. "Room 7, stat." Kevin was at my elbow, holding my insurance card as we moved through the department. Nurses were checking my vital signs, starting an IV, asking rapid-fire questions about allergies, medications, recent changes in diet or environment. Dr. Patel, a calm woman in her 40s, administered epinephrine and steroids through the IV. Within minutes, I could breathe again, though my face still looked like I'd been stung by a swarm of bees. "Mr. Patterson, you've had a serious anaphylactic reaction. We need to keep you for observation and run comprehensive allergy testing to identify the trigger. This type of reaction can be life-threatening if it happens again." The relief of being able to breathe again flooded through me. I nodded gratefully at Dr. Patel, ready to agree to any treatment that would prevent this nightmare from recurring. But Kevin had questions. "Doctor, how necessary are these tests? I mean, he's okay now, right? Maybe he just ate something that disagreed with him." And that's when everything went wrong. "The allergy testing is crucial," Dr. Patel explained patiently. "Mr. Patterson had a severe anaphylactic reaction. We need to identify what triggered it so he can avoid it in the future and carry emergency medication." "How much does this testing cost?" Kevin asked. "Your father's insurance covers most of it. The out-of-pocket cost would be about $890. I saw Kevin's jaw tighten. Wendy stood behind him, her arms crossed, both of them looking at me like I was a problematic expense they couldn't afford. "Dad," Kevin said, his voice carrying that edge I'd learned to recognize. $890 is a lot of money for tests that might not even find anything. "Kevin, it's my money and I want the tests," I said firmly. That's when Kevin exploded. "Stop wasting my money." His voice echoed off the walls of the emergency room. The teenage skateboarder stopped texting. The mother with the sick toddler stared openly. 2 nurses at the station looked up from their charts. An elderly woman in the bed next to mine whispered something to her daughter about how awful. Kevin yanked my insurance card from my hands so aggressively that my IV tube pulled tight, sending a sharp pain up my arm. "I'm not authorizing any unnecessary tests. He's fine now. This is exactly the kind of wasteful spending that's going to eat up every penny he's saved." Dr. Patel looked confused. "Sir, I need to clarify. Are you Mr. Patterson's healthcare proxy?" "I handle his finances," Kevin said, still holding my insurance card hostage. "And I'm telling you, we don't need your expensive testing. Everyone was watching. Everyone heard my son call me a waste of his money." My face burned with humiliation that had nothing to do with the allergic reaction. Kevin drove us home through the quiet streets of Lakewood in complete silence. I sat in the passenger seat with a prescription for emergency epinephrine and a follow-up appointment I knew I'd never keep. Dr. Patel had given me minimal treatment, enough to stop the immediate reaction, but no answers about what had caused it. Wendy occasionally glanced back at me from the front passenger seat with what I suppose she thought was sympathy, but I could see calculation in her eyes. She was probably already mentally tallying how much money Kevin had saved by preventing the allergy testing. "Dad," Kevin finally said as we pulled into my driveway. I'm sorry I raised my voice. "But you have to understand our position. Our position. Not my position. Not concern for my health and safety. Their financial position. You have to think about the bigger picture," Wendy added. "At your age, every medical decision has to be weighed against practical considerations. $890 for testing that might not change anything seems irresponsible." I got out of their car without saying a word and walked to my front door. I could hear them talking quietly behind me, probably discussing how unreasonable I was being, how stubborn, how unwilling to accept their help. Inside my empty house, I sat in Margaret's chair and stared at the wall for 2 hours. Then I went to my office and turned on the desk lamp. That night changed everything. I spread my financial documents across the desk like a general planning a military campaign. Bank statements, insurance policies, property deeds, retirement accounts, every piece of paper that proved what I owned and controlled. The numbers were stark and clear. Even after Margaret's medical expenses, even after 2 years of Kevin's cost-saving measures, I still had $186,000 in liquid assets. My house was worth at least $315,000, probably more in the current market. I had a secure pension from General Electric and Social Security that covered my basic living expenses. I wasn't poor. I wasn't a burden. I was a financially stable 71-year-old man being treated like an incompetent child by his greedy son. The power of attorney papers lay open beside my keyboard. I read them again carefully, this time looking for escape routes instead of obligations. Kevin had access to my accounts, but I retained ownership and the right to revoke his authority at any time. The bank signature cards showed me as primary account holder, Kevin as authorized user. I could remove him with a single visit to the bank. The house deed bore only my name. No joint ownership, no transfer on death beneficiary. Kevin had no legal claim to my home. Every document told the same story. I had given Kevin access and convenience, but I had never given up control. I just had to take it back. By morning, I had a plan. Dawn broke gray and cold as I made the phone calls that would change everything. First, Huntington Bank to schedule an appointment with the branch manager. Then my estate attorney, Harold Brennan, who'd handled our legal affairs since Margaret and I bought our first house. "Tom, good to hear from you," Harold said in his gravelly voice. "How are you holding up?" "I need to discuss some changes to my financial arrangements. Can I come in this week?" "Of course. Is everything all right?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Let's just say I need to reassert some boundaries with family members." Harold had been a lawyer for 40 years. He understood immediately. "I see. Yes, we should definitely meet. How about Thursday at 2? When Kevin called that morning to check on my recovery, I kept my voice neutral and pleasant. "I'm feeling much better, Kevin. Thank you for asking." "Good, good. Listen, Dad, about last night. I hope you understand we're just looking out for your best interests." "I understand perfectly." And I did understand. Kevin saw me as an obstacle between him and what he considered his rightful inheritance. Wendy saw me as a financial burden, to be managed efficiently until I died and freed up resources for their children's future. They wanted me to stop wasting their money. Kevin would learn the true meaning of ownership. Huntington Bank at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday morning was busy with the usual mix of business customers and retirees handling their affairs. I sat in the branch manager's office, a comfortable room with family photos and civic awards on the walls, and explained my situation to Mrs. Henderson, a professional woman in her 50s who'd helped Margaret and me with our banking for years. "Mr. Patterson, I'm sorry to hear about your difficulties with your son," she said after I described the events at the hospital. "But I have good news for you. As the primary account holder, you have absolute authority to modify or remove any authorized users from your accounts." She pulled up my account information on her computer screen. "Your son has debit card access and can write checks, but the account remains entirely in your name. We can revoke his access immediately and issue you new account numbers if you'd prefer." What about the money currently in the account? It's your money, Mr. Patterson. You can transfer it, withdraw it, or move it to different accounts as you see fit. Mr. Kevin Patterson has no legal claim to any funds in accounts where he's listed as an authorized user only. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized was there. I'd like to transfer the full balance to a new account at a different bank, I said. Today, if possible. Mrs. Henderson smiled. We can start that process right now. Kevin had access to my money, but the money was still mine. He was about to learn the difference. Thursday afternoon found me sitting in the bright, modern offices of Sunset Manor, the premier assisted living facility in Rocky River. I hadn't planned to move anywhere, but the events of the past week had clarified something important. I needed to be around people who saw me as a person, not a bank account. Lisa Rodriguez, the community director, walked me through the facility with genuine enthusiasm. Private apartments with kitchenettes, restaurant-style dining, fitness center, library, scheduled social activities, and most importantly, on-site medical care with nurses available 24 hours a day. Our residents loved the independence combined with security, Lisa explained as we toured a one-bedroom apartment with large windows overlooking a beautifully landscaped courtyard. You maintain your privacy and autonomy, but help is always available if you need it. The monthly fee was $4,200, expensive but well within my budget if I sold my house. More importantly, it was a place where my medical needs would be respected, where qualified professionals would prioritize my health over cost savings. We have a waiting list, Lisa mentioned, but I could put you down for the next available unit if you're interested. I signed the paperwork that afternoon. When Kevin called that evening for his regular check-in, I didn't mention my visit to Sunset Manor. I didn't mention my meeting with the bank manager either, or my appointment with Harold Brennan the next day. Kevin still thought he was managing my life. He had no idea I was planning to disappear from his. Sunday dinner at my house had been a tradition for 3 years, ever since Margaret got too weak to cook for large groups. This week, I prepared the meal with extra care. Pot roast with carrots and potatoes, Margaret's dinner rolls, apple pie from her recipe box. I wanted this final dinner to be perfect. Emma and Jake played in the living room while Kevin and Wendy sat at my kitchen table, discussing their vacation plans for next summer and whether they could afford to take the kids to Disney World. We should be able to manage it, Kevin said, once Dad's expenses are more under control. Dad's expenses. As if my medical needs and basic living costs were line items in their family budget. I watched my grandchildren building elaborate structures with Jake's building blocks, their young faces bright with imagination and joy. Emma was telling Jake a story about a princess who lived in a castle made of golden bricks. Jake added dragons and brave knights to the narrative. They were beautiful children. I loved them deeply. But they were being raised by parents who saw their grandfather as a burden to be managed until he conveniently died and left them his money. After dessert, I walked them to their car and hugged each grandchild tightly. "I love you, Grandpa," Emma said. "I love you too, sweetheart. Don't ever forget that." Kevin and Wendy assumed it was normal grandfather sentimentality. They had no idea I was saying goodbye. Monday morning, I called Janet Morrison, the realtor who'd helped several neighbors sell their homes in recent years. The housing market in Lakewood was strong, especially for well-maintained properties in established neighborhoods. "Tom, I'm so sorry for your loss," Janet said when I explained my situation. "Margaret was such a lovely woman. Are you sure you're ready to sell? This is a big decision. I'm sure I need a change, and this house has too many memories." It wasn't entirely a lie. Every room held 45 years of shared life with Margaret. But the real reason was simpler. I needed to liquidate my assets before Kevin realized what was happening. Janet came over that afternoon to assess the property. 3 bedrooms, 2 full baths, hardwood floors, updated kitchen, large backyard with Margaret's perennial garden. The bones of the house were solid, the maintenance impeccable. "I think we can list this for $320,000, Janet said. "Possibly more, depending on market response. Houses in this neighborhood are selling quickly." "How quickly? In this market? If we price it right, probably within 2 weeks." That evening, I walked through each room slowly, remembering. Margaret reading in the sunroom, Kevin as a toddler learning to walk down the hallway, Christmas mornings with wrapped presents under the tree, 45 years of ordinary moments that had built an extraordinary life. I was ready to let it go. By Thursday, we had the listing photos done and the house on the market. Friday afternoon, we received our first serious offer. Harold Brennan's law office smelled like old books and fresh coffee, a comforting combination that reminded me of the General Electric libraries where I'd spent so many hours researching technical specifications. Harold sat behind his mahogany desk, reviewing the documents I'd brought: bank statements, power of attorney paperwork, insurance policies, property deeds. "Tom, you're in excellent shape legally," he said after studying everything for 20 minutes. "Kevin has access but no ownership rights. You can revoke his financial power of attorney immediately and update your estate planning however you choose." "I want to change everything. New will, new healthcare directive, new beneficiaries for my retirement accounts." Harold raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. Good lawyers understand that families are complicated. We spent 2 hours updating my legal documents. The new will left $25,000 to Emma and Jake's education funds, $10,000 to the Cleveland Clinic Foundation in Margaret's name, and the remainder to the American Cancer Society. Kevin and Wendy were not mentioned anywhere. The healthcare directive named Harold as my medical decision-maker if I became incapacitated, with specific instructions that no family members were to be consulted about my care without my explicit consent. "Kevin will be able to contest these changes," Harold warned. "On what grounds? I'm 71, not 91. I'm mentally competent, I'm acting voluntarily, and I have good reasons for my decisions." Harold nodded. "The documents are legally sound. But Tom, are you absolutely sure about this? Disinheriting your only child is permanent. So is humiliating your father in a hospital emergency room. I signed every document without hesitation. The house sold for $315,000 to a young couple with twin babies who fell in love with Margaret's garden and the mature oak trees shading the backyard. After realtor fees, taxes, and closing costs, I netted $298,000. Combined with my existing savings, I had $484,000 in liquid assets. I moved every penny to new accounts at KeyBank, a different financial institution where Kevin had no access, no history, no way to track my finances. The old Huntington bank accounts remained open with exactly $127, enough to make Kevin realize the transfer was intentional when he eventually discovered it. $127. I chose that number carefully. Not zero, which might suggest a bank error or account closure. Not a round number like $100 or $200, which might seem accidental. $127 was an odd amount that could only be deliberate. A message that said, "I left you enough for lunch, but nothing more." The KeyBank branch manager, Mr. Foster, handled the large transfer with professional discretion. "Your funds are completely secure here, Mr. Patterson. Would you like to set up automatic payments for your new residence?" "Yes, please. Brookside Manor in Rocky River, $4,200 a month. With my new financial setup, I could live comfortably at Brookside Manor for nearly 10 years without touching my Social Security or pension. I had taken control of my life and my money. Kevin still had no idea what was coming, but he was about to find out. I disappeared. The professional movers arrived at 6 in the morning on a crisp October Tuesday. I'd hired Allied Van Lines, a company that specialized in senior relocations, and they worked with quiet efficiency to pack 45 years of accumulated life into carefully labeled boxes. I kept only what mattered: Margaret's jewelry, our wedding photos, my engineering awards from General Electric, a few pieces of furniture that would fit in my new apartment. Everything else went to estate sale or donation. The movers were loading the truck when Mrs. Kowalski from next door came over with a concerned expression. "Tom, dear, where are you going? Kevin didn't mention you were moving." "I'm moving to an assisted living facility in Rocky River, Sunset Manor. It's a beautiful place." "But what about Kevin? Does he know?" I smiled politely. "Kevin will figure it out." Mrs. Kowalski looked confused but didn't press further. By noon, the house was empty, except for cleaning supplies, and the lockbox Janet Morrison would use for the final walkthrough with the new owners. I drove my Honda Accord through the familiar streets of Lakewood one last time, past the barber shop where I'd gotten haircuts for 20 years, past the grocery store where Margaret used to buy ingredients for Sunday dinners, past the park where I'd pushed Kevin on swings when he was 5 years old. I felt no sadness leaving, only relief. At Sunset Manor, the staff greeted me like family. My apartment was bright and clean, with large windows overlooking the courtyard. For the first time in 2 years, I felt safe. My phone stayed turned off. My first week at Brookside Manor passed in a blur of new routines and genuine human kindness. The staff treated me with respect and dignity that I'd almost forgotten was possible. Linda, my nurse, checked on me daily without making me feel like a burden. The dining room served excellent food at reasonable prices. The other residents welcomed me into their social circles without judgment or calculation. Most importantly, I had immediate access to quality health care. Dr. Patel, a different Dr. Patel than the emergency room physician, but equally competent, conducted a comprehensive evaluation and scheduled the allergy testing Kevin had refused to authorize. Mr. Patterson, you had a severe reaction to shellfish, specifically to shrimp protein. It can develop suddenly even in people who've eaten shellfish safely for years. We'll make sure you have emergency epinephrine available at all times. The testing cost $890, exactly the amount that had triggered Kevin's public humiliation campaign. I paid for it gladly with my KeyBank debit card, money that Kevin could never touch again. My new apartment felt like home within days. Margaret's china in the built-in cabinet, our wedding photos on the dresser, my favorite reading chair by the window. The maintenance staff kept everything spotless. The social director organized activities that actually interested me. Bridge games, book clubs, guest lectures on topics ranging from gardening to astronomy. For the first time since Margaret died, I felt like myself again. Not a burden to be managed, not a bank account to be preserved, but a person with value and dignity. Meanwhile, my phone collected dozens of increasingly frantic voicemails from Kevin. I listened to none of them. Kevin's first voicemail was casual. "Hey Dad, just checking in. Call me back when you get a chance." By the end of the week, his tone had shifted to concerned. "Dad, I've been trying to reach you for 3 days. Are you okay? Please call me." The following Monday brought panic. "Dad, where are you? I drove by the house and there are strangers living there. Mrs. Kowalski said you moved, but she doesn't know where. I'm really worried. Please call me." I had arranged for my mail to be forwarded to a P.O. box in downtown Cleveland that I checked once a week. No physical address Kevin could trace, no neighbors to question, no paper trail leading to Sunset Manor. The beautiful irony was that Kevin had spent 2 years training me to minimize my expenses and live efficiently. Now, I was doing exactly that, but without him. Wendy left messages too, professional and controlled at first. "Tom, this is Wendy. Kevin is concerned because he can't reach you. As a healthcare professional, I want to make sure you're safe." Then, increasingly desperate, "Tom, please call us. The children are asking about you. Emma wants to know why Grandpa won't talk to them." That message stung, but I held firm. Kevin and Wendy had made their position clear in that emergency room. I was a waste of their money, an expensive burden to be managed. They wanted me to stop being a financial drain. I had given them exactly what they asked for: complete financial independence from their budget. The call came on a Wednesday morning 3 weeks after I'd moved to Sunset Manor. I was in the dining room enjoying coffee and conversation with new friends when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Kevin's number. For the first time in weeks, I answered. "Dad, thank God. Where are you? Are you hurt? We've been looking everywhere." "I'm fine, Kevin. Where are you staying? Mrs. Kowalski said strangers are living in your house. What happened to the house?" "I sold it." Dead silence. "You sold it? Without telling me?" "It was my house to sell." "But Dad, where's the money? I tried to access your account yesterday to pay some bills and the bank said there were insufficient funds. The account only has $127. There it was, the real reason for his panic. Not concern for my safety or well-being. Kevin had discovered that his access to my money was gone. "The money is in new accounts that you can't access." "What do you mean I can't access them? I'm your financial power of attorney." "Not anymore. I revoked your authority 3 weeks ago." Another long silence. Then, "Dad, you can't do this. That money is... We've been counting on..." "Counting on what, Kevin?" The kids' college funds. You mean your inheritance?" "Dad, please, we need to talk about this, face to face. Tell me where you are." No. Reality hit them hard. Kevin was finally learning that he'd never owned my money in the first place. The voicemails that followed my brief phone conversation revealed the true depth of Kevin and Wendy's financial planning around my death. Messages I saved but never returned, digital evidence of their entitlement and desperation. "Dad, this is insane," Kevin's voice cracked with barely controlled panic. "You can't just disappear with our family's financial security. Emma needs braces next year." Jake has been accepted to that private preschool. We bought our house based on the assumption that we'd have your support. Support. That was their word for my inheritance. "Tom, this is Wendy. I've spoken with several estate planning attorneys. What you've done might constitute elder abuse, isolating yourself from family, making radical financial decisions without consulting the people who love you. We're concerned about your mental state." The next message revealed their desperation more clearly. "Dad, I talked to Harold Brennan's office. They won't tell me anything because of client confidentiality, but I know you've been there. Whatever you've done to your will, we can contest it. A judge will look at this pattern of sudden, secretive behavior and realize you're not thinking clearly." They were wrong, of course. Harold had been careful to document my mental competence, my clear reasoning for every decision, my understanding of the consequences. But it was fascinating to hear them strategize about challenging my right to control my own money and property. The final message came from Emma, obviously coached but heartbreakingly sincere. "Grandpa, it's Emma. Daddy says you're mad at us. I'm sorry if we did something wrong. I miss you. Will you come to my dance recital next month? Please call me back." That message nearly broke my resolve. But then I remembered Kevin screaming at me in the emergency room, treating me like a wasteful burden in front of strangers. They had made their choice. Now they had to live with the consequences. Through my network of former neighbors and casual acquaintances, information filtered back to me about Kevin and Wendy's financial crisis. Lakewood is a small community where news travels quickly, especially when it involves dramatic family conflicts. Kevin had been living beyond their means for years, counting on my death to solve their budget problems. With my financial support suddenly cut off, their precarious house of cards was collapsing. The mortgage payment on their colonial was $2,400 a month. Kevin's insurance job paid $65,000 annually. Wendy had been working part-time to spend more time with the children, bringing in another $1,800 monthly. Even without my money factored in, they were barely breaking even. But they'd been spending as if my $186,000 was already theirs. Emma's dance classes, the private preschool for Jake, the family vacation to Disney World they'd booked for next summer. All of it planned around money that had never been theirs to plan around. Mrs. Kowalski, bless her gossipy heart, kept me informed through our occasional phone conversations. "Tom, dear, I saw Kevin putting a for sale sign in front of their house yesterday." Wendy looked absolutely distraught. "And I heard from Linda Morrison, that's Janet's sister-in-law, that they're moving the children to public school next semester." The irony was perfect. Kevin and Wendy, who had spent 2 years lecturing me about financial responsibility and wasteful spending, had built their entire lifestyle around inheriting money from the man they treated like a burden. They were learning the difference between planning and entitlement, between financial management and financial ownership, between being helpful and being manipulative. The lessons were expensive, but then again, the most important lessons usually are. Kevin hired a private investigator. I learned this through Harold Brennan, who received a call from someone claiming to be conducting a wellness check on me at the request of my concerned family. "Tom, they're trying to find you," Harold warned during one of our weekly phone calls. The investigator asked about recent transactions, property transfers, medical records. Of course, I told him nothing due to attorney-client privilege, but you should know they're serious about locating you. It was almost flattering, in a twisted way. Kevin, who had spent 2 years treating me like an inconvenient expense, was now spending serious money trying to track me down. The private investigator's fee was probably more than Kevin had ever spent on my health care. Harold also informed me that Kevin had consulted with 3 different attorneys about contesting my legal changes. All 3 had given him the same advice. He had no grounds for challenge. Your son seems to believe that managing your finances for 2 years gave him some kind of legal claim to your assets. Harold chuckled. The attorneys explained that power of attorney is a privilege that can be revoked at any time by the principal. Kevin never owned anything. He just had temporary access. Wendy, meanwhile, had contacted Adult Protective Services, claiming I was being influenced by unscrupulous people who were isolating me from my family. The social worker who investigated found me happily settled at Sunset Manor, mentally sharp, physically healthy, and surrounded by friends and quality medical care. Case closed. Kevin and Wendy were running out of legal options, running out of money to pay investigators and attorneys, and running out of time to solve their financial crisis. But I wasn't finished with them yet. There was one final message I needed to send. They finally understood they had no power over me. Now it was time for them to understand why. I wrote the letter on Brookside Manor stationery, my handwriting careful and deliberate. Not because my hands were unsteady, they weren't, but because I wanted every word to be perfectly clear. The letter contained 2 sentences. I mailed it to Kevin and Wendy's house on a Thursday morning, timing it to arrive on Saturday when they'd both be home with the children. No return address, no explanation, no invitation for further communication. Just 2 sentences that would explain everything they needed to understand about what had happened and why. Saturday afternoon, Kevin called my phone 17 times in 2 hours. I let every call go to voicemail, but I didn't listen to the messages. Whatever he had to say now, after weeks of threats and legal maneuvering and private investigators, was irrelevant. The letter said everything I needed to say. After 43 years of work, 2 years of manipulation, and 1 moment of public humiliation in a hospital emergency room, our relationship could be summarized in exactly 22 words. 2 sentences that would haunt Kevin for the rest of his life. The letter was brief. You wanted my money to stop being wasted. I listened. Tom Patterson. 22 words that distilled 2 years of growing resentment into perfect clarity. Kevin had told me to stop wasting his money, so I did. I stopped wasting it on myself, stopped letting him access it, stopped letting him treat my financial security as his inheritance. I stopped being a burden on his budget. Kevin and Wendy had gotten exactly what they'd asked for in that emergency room. I was no longer wasting their money on unnecessary medical care, expensive prescriptions, or costly hearing aids. I was no longer a financial drain on their family resources, because my money was no longer their money. It had never been their money at all. The simplicity of the message was its power. No lengthy explanations, no emotional appeals, no invitations to reconcile. Just a clear statement of cause and effect. They had demanded financial independence from me. I had given them exactly that. Independence. Complete and permanent. 2 sentences changed everything. 6 months later, I'm writing this story from my apartment at Brookside Manor on a spring morning that would have made Margaret smile. The courtyard is alive with flowers. The dining room hums with friendly conversation. And my new physician has just given me a clean bill of health after comprehensive medical care that no one questions or resents. Kevin never found me, and that's exactly how I wanted it. I heard through the neighborhood network that he and Wendy sold their house and moved to a smaller apartment across town. The children transferred to public school. Wendy returned to full-time nursing work. Kevin took a second job on weekends. They learned to live within their means instead of living within mine. I sleep well now, without the weight of their expectations, their resentment, their constant evaluation of my worth against my cost. The money I saved over 43 years of hard work takes care of me in dignity and comfort, exactly as I planned when I was earning it. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is teaching them the value of what they've lost. Now I need to know, do you think I went too far? Or was Kevin getting exactly what he deserved? The comments on these videos always fascinate me. If this story resonated with you, you'll want to hear my other family drama stories. Hit that subscribe button and the bell icon. Because unfortunately, Kevin's story isn't the worst one I've got. Next week, I'm sharing what happened when my neighbor's daughter-in-law tried to have her declared incompetent. You won't believe how that turned out.